move, like picking the right market at the right time.
It's less destiny, more smart capital allocation. He picked the market with the clearest pathway to minutes and the biggest upside if he delivers. That's like signing with a club where you start on day one, not sitting on the bench waiting for a catalyst.
And there it is. Plant the flag, no hesitation, no rear view mirror. May 2023, he picks the stars and stripes, and you can feel the confidence in every touch since, like a striker who's finally found his shirt and his stage.
Not much movement. US still pinned 80.59, 0.60, but that massive offer side depth screams crowded favorite and limits upside unless a real catalyst hits. Australia's book is still lopsided with heavy supply overhead, so any rally there looks like it'll be.
Imo, this Balogan hype is off the charts. Pulisic calling him insane is like a blue chip endorsement. Give us the market angle. What's the value of a young striker's brand when a whole stadium's chanting his name?
Absolutely. When your captain vouches for you, that's like an AKA upgrade, and the crowd becomes the liquidity. A young striker with chance behind him gets a momentum premium fast, but it's still a striker's market. Miss two sitters, and the spread widens.
Imo, this Balogan USA decision feels like a blue chip investment paying dividends. 2 goals already, Seattle buzzing. Give us your market take. Is this the kind of long-term buy that changes a team's valuation overnight? Oh, you can feel it, can't you? Seattle bouncing chance rolling in like waves, and Balogan wearing that number like it's tailored. 2 goals in the opener, and now the Outlaws have written him his own soundtrack. That's when a debut turns into a movement. Balogan's 2-goal tournament start being compared to 1930. Seattle hype is peaking. Got any quick angle on how a breakout star like this shifts a team's value or expectations, like a stock popping on earnings?
Totally. 2 early goals is a blowout earnings beat, and the market instantly prices in a higher ceiling for the whole squad. But hype trades are fragile. 1 quiet match and you get profit taking faster than I get winded walking up studio stairs.
Imo, 2 goals to start a tournament. Numbers like that scream bull market in confidence. Give us your quick take. Is Balogan the kind of high upside asset that changes the whole portfolio, or are we still pricing in risk? Imo, they're talking development. Balogan made abroad, but cashing in for the US. Give us your quick take. Is this like importing a finished product versus investing in a youth academy pipeline, cost-benefit style?
Exactly. This is buying a proven product off the shelf instead of waiting years for the academy R&D to pay out. You pay a premium, but you get immediate production and a clearer game plan, like signing a striker to fix the XG problem overnight. Yeah, it's like buying a proven overseas blue chip instead of waiting on a homegrown IPO. Faster impact, less development risk. The trick is integration. If the system fits, you get instant multiple expansion. If not, it trades like a value trap.
Imo, this flow striker talk is like a breakout stock. Developed abroad, comes in and instantly delivers 2 goals. How do you value a talent pipeline when the asset is trained overseas but pays dividends for the national team? Imo, they're talking about the value of a true number 9, paid the big bucks to score. Give us the market angle. What's a proven striker worth in today's game, and how scarcity drives that price?
Exactly. An elite number 9 is like scarce liquidity in a tight market. When goals are hard to come by, the price of certainty explodes. Clubs pay up because 1 clean finish can flip the whole earnings report in 90 minutes.
Imo, they're talking about a true number 9 finally delivering big money striker impact, consistency, paid to score vibes. Give us your market analogy. Is this like finally finding a blue chip after years of penny stocks?
Nailed it. This is the market finally rotating out of lottery ticket penny stocks into a dividend-paying blue chip that just does the job every quarter. You pay a premium for consistency because it stabilizes the whole portfolio when the game gets choppy. Yep, the market's ruthless. Recency bias is the loudest fan in the stadium. 1 match is a pump, but if he strings together repeatable chances and finishes, that's blue chip cash flow and the multiple sticks. Until then, it's a hot trade, not a long-term holding.
They're saying, what have you done for me lately about the striker? Can you riff on that like a stock? Form as quarterly earnings, hype versus consistency, and what the market fans demands next game? Absolutely. If he's doing the dirty work and still sniffing out chances, that's a striker worth his weight in gold. Those runs are like pulling defenders on a string, and suddenly the whole attack breathes. Now the challenge is backing it up again. Keep the danger constant.
US bids actually thickened 0.59, so there's real support. Buyers are holding the line like a top seed protecting a 1-goal lead, but that Massive US offer depth overhead says upside is capped unless someone lands a clean catalyst. Australia.
IMO, they're joking about building a World Cup backyard. Home Depot for the assist. Give us a quick market take. What happens to home improvement stocks when big tournaments hit town? That's a full-on DIY World Cup montage, isn't it? Everyone's got a gimmick, and David's out here collecting assists in aisle 7. If the backyard's half as sharp as that wordplay, we're kicking off on a pitch with fresh paint and honey on the sidelines. Ha! He's been handed the retirement package, and he's looking around like, who signed me up for this transfer? If that's not a red card for paperwork, I don't know what is. Someone get VAR on the fine print. Rick's retirement is pure chaos. 1 minute golfing, next minute he's in a full contact scramble like a Sunday League derby. And Mandarin on top of it, that's not a hobby, that's a whole new league he's trying to get promoted into. Rick's golfing is the oldest disguise in the book. Meanwhile, it sounds like he's in a cage match behind the clubhouse. And learning Mandarin too, that's a man hedging his bets like a transfer window on deadline day.
We're seeing tiny softening in depth, but pricing hasn't budged. US stays glued 808590.60 like a team recycling possession without taking the shot. Draw liquidity remains the safety valve. Australia's ask stack eased a touch, but it's
IMO, that prudential income for life pitch just hit like a sponsor break. Give us the quick market angle. Annuities, rates, and why retirees are suddenly the hottest transfer target.
Totally. Annuities are back in vogue because higher rates finally make income for life absolutely viral moment. Nailed it. This is a momentum trade in real time. One clip, millions of impressions, and suddenly Adidas gets a surge of free reach that would cost a fortune in ads. It's like scoring in stoppage time. Brand recall jumps when emotions are highest, and that's price.
Oh, that's a tasty slate tomorrow. Netherlands versus Sweden has early fireworks written all over it. And Musiala with Germany is box office every single touch. IMO, that's primetime inventory right there. Adidas will be loving the numbers. Sensational outside of the boot goal just dropped. This is the kind of highlight that spikes viewership and sponsor value instantly. Adidas Prudential types will be grinning. Talk us through the brand impact when a clip goes viral. Outside the boot screamer just hit the net. Pure highlight reel moment. With Adidas fronting pre-kick, this is the kind of viral goal that spikes engagement and sponsor value instantly. Give us the market angle.
We're basically unchanged on price, but the US bid depth just slipped a touch. Still a solid 0.59 floor, just not getting thicker right now. Draw bids firmed back up, so some traders are buying insurance. Australia remains boxed in under that heavy 0.19 supply.
Pepe's in, Pulisic out, here we go, sink or swim stuff, and you can feel the nerves buzzing through the stadium lights. After that goal fest last time, the bar's sky high, but Australia won't hand out freebies. This is a proper test of character. Fox hyping USA Australia with Adidas presenting Pulisic out, Pepe in, Poch wants 2 strikers. Any quick take on how star injuries and attacking setups move viewership, brand value in these big broadcasts? Poch going with 2 strikers to match Australia's physicality feels like a high-risk, high-reward play. Give us your market read. Is this aggressive setup like going long early, or is it over-leveraged if the game turns scrappy?
Yeah, it's like putting on a risk-on position at the opening whistle. If tempo stays high, you get paid fast. But if it turns into a midfield wrestling match, that extra striker is leverage you can't unwind, and the draw trade suddenly looks very live.
Zlatan's loving the chaos, and honestly, so am I. 2 strikers means you've always got a puncher and a poacher lurking. But he's spot on. Off the ball is the real story, because if they don't press as a pair, Australia will play through them like a training drill. Exactly. When it's 2 bodies in the box, defenders can't just bully one lone forward and call it a day. Suddenly, they're checking shoulders, arguing over runners, and one little half step becomes a full-blown emergency. That's old-school pressure, and it makes mistakes happen.
Australia bid depth just perked up a bit, but it's still staring at that big 0.99 offer like a striker facing a parked bus. US remains the consensus play 80.59, 0.60, yet that massive ask stack says
Popovich is basically saying, I need fresh legs for the roller coaster because those wide rolls are pure punishment. Sprint, recover, repeat. But leaving your last match's scorers on the bench is a gamble, and if this stays tight, those subs could be the spark or the headline.
We're basically unchanged, but you can feel the market leaning on the US. Bid depth is solid, while that giant sell wall overhead keeps it from sprinting away. Draw stays the sneaky, scrappy game hedge with real size on the bid, and Australia still can't crack that sweet.
Amo Popovich benching the scores feels like rotating a portfolio before earnings. High risk, high reward. What's your take on that kind of fresh legs gamble when the match gets tight? All right, we'll hand it back to Ross and the crew in Seattle. Set pieces, second balls, and nerves are going to decide this one. And Amo, if this match was a stock, it's pure volatility. One mistake and the whole chart spikes. Pepe's in, and I love it. He's that striker who'll do the dirty work, drag defenders around, and still pop up where it hurts. The big question is whether he's chained out wide or unleashed through the middle, because that changes the whole rhythm of the U.S. attack. Yeah, he links play beautifully, drops in, lays it off, spins, and suddenly the defense is chasing shadows. But at this level, you want that killer instinct too, the I'll make my own luck moment, especially against a low block that won't give you freebies. That's the fuel right there. Missed the last dance, so tonight he's playing like the door's closing behind him. Strikers live on moments, and if Pepe gets one sniff in the box, he's got to turn it into a headline. Pepe's locked in. No interviews, all business. Give me your market take. Is this focus like a company going quiet before a breakout quarter, or just hype risk?
Yeah, that's the no guidance, just execute vibe. Markets usually reward it if the first touch is clean. But if he starts snatching at chances, that focus narrative flips into overhype fast, and the draw trade suddenly looks smarter. US is still holding that 0.60 bid, but notice the bid depth cooled. Buyers are there, just not charging anymore. Australia's ask wall slid down to 0.8, so the upset's cheaper to ensure, yet the tape still screams favorite unless that 0.62 lid breaks.
Chris Richards, pride of Alabama, cool as ice back there, like he's got a remote control for the back line. When the storm hits and the U.S. get tested, he's the one you want stepping in, winning duels, and starting the counter with one clean pass. Exactly. Ream's the smooth operator on the ball, but if the alarm bells ring and it turns into a foot race, Richards becomes the fireman. Those recovery runs, those last-ditch covers, that's where games get saved and heroes get made. That smile's a trap. Richards looks friendly until you try to run past him, then it's welcome to the ground. Thank you very much. He's got that ruthless edge you need in a tournament. Calm face, hard tackles, and he'll stamp out danger like a boot on a spark. They're hyping an under-the-radar U.S. guy who swung game one. Love that value pick vibe. Who's your blue-chip sleeper comparison in markets when someone quietly changes the whole picture?
Totally. This is the quiet mid-cap that suddenly posts a blowout quarter move, like NVIDIA pre-2023 when only the nerds cared. One player shifts the flow and the market reprices fast. Late buyers end up paying the spread.
Trinity Rodman stepping in with that star power. Seattle's loving it, and the place is absolutely rocking. You can almost hear the ball begging to be kicked. The crowd's already at full volume, and we haven't even started the drama yet. It's a global watch party. Seattle roaring, Melbourne wide awake, Kansas City locked in, and DC shining like a postcard behind it all. Nights like this feel bigger than 90 minutes, like the whole sport's plugged into one giant heartbeat. 15 minutes out and Seattle's already in full throat. This is the kind of stage where you grab a country by the collar and say, believe. 2 wins on the bounce would be a statement, and you can feel the expectation crackling like electricity. Now that's the carrot dangling. Win it and you're not just through, you're strutting out as potential group kings by nightfall. But that's when nerves bite hardest, because everyone's chasing you and one slip turns the whole table upside down. Here we go, walkouts next. This is the moment the noise turns into a wall and every player's heartbeat is louder than the anthem in their head. And that not yet rated tag, that's fine. Football doesn't need a rating when it's about to deliver pure chaos. Imo, did you catch that product not yet rated line? Feels like a pre-IPO disclaimer before kickoff. Give us your take while the teams walk out.
Now that's a surge. US bid depth jumps to 2.5 nullas while the quote stays glued 0.61, 0.62. So buyers are stacking the midfield and controlling tempo. If that 0.62 wall finally cracks, it's a quick count.
Ha! Beckham can bend it, but he can't bag the cup. Football's cruel like that, isn't it? No bueno is right, because the only cup that matters is the one you lift at the end, and that's a long road from breakfast. Imo, they're plugging those World Cup breakfast cups, one of 9 collectibles, Beckham joke and all. Any quick take on how these promos move merch or brand value during tournaments?
US still holds 0.61, 0.62, but that ask stack just got weird. Top offer showing way up at 0.99, which tells me sellers pulled liquidity and the book's thinner than it looks. That's a volatility setup. One clean push and price.
They're shouting, go all in, win a million, like it's a transfer deadline frenzy. Give us the market reality check on that kind of hype.
Absolutely. When the crowd screams all, that's FOMO buying at the top of the candle, not smart positioning. It feels like transfer deadline day, but the spread and slippage are the agent's fees that quietly eat you alive.
Valvoline sliding in like a fresh set of legs in stoppage time. Keep the engine purring, keep the dream alive. IMO, that's your territory. Is this brand running like a blue chip, or is it just revving the ad budget? Rocket Mortgage and Redfin promising big savings. Sounds like a bundle deal in the transfer market. Is that 12K real value or just headline hype? And what does it say about the housing market right now?
Yeah, it's a bundle promo, some real savings for a narrow slice, but the headline number is like quoting a striker's up to bonus. The bigger tell is demand still rate sensitive, so lenders and platforms are cutting fees to keep the pipeline moving.
IMO Rocket Mortgage teaming with Redfin. Big savings pitch. Is that synergy real value or just marketing smoke? And Toyota's resale value flex, does that translate to investor confidence or just showroom bragging rights?
Yeah, the Rocket Redfin tie-up is real synergy on paper, lower friction and more leads, but the loud savings pitch screams, we need volume in a rate-choppy market. Toyota's resale value flex is genuine brand equity. It's like a team with a deep bench.
IMO, Rocket Mortgage and Redfin dangling save up to 12K. That's a big headline. How's the housing market vibe right now? Bargain or bait?
You're reading it right. This feels less like demand heating up and more like teams protecting territory when the pitch is slippery. When credit's tight, promos are the counterpress. Keep volume moving without admitting pricing power is gone. That US ask stack just backed off the touchline. Top offer jumps out to 0.99 and total asks eased, so near-term selling pressure looks less suffocating. But price still pinned 0.61, 0.62, so it's like a team.
IMO, we've got smoke machines, video walls, even actual fire. This production's spending like a bull market. Give us your take. Is this hype worth the investment, or are we heading for a budget bubble?
US bids just stepped up. Top bid is now sitting at 0.61, so buyers are getting more aggressive and tightening the spread like a late game press. Draw offers also slid down to 0.23 with a chunky wall, so upside there looks capped unless momentum flips back. US is still the heavyweight, AT 0.61, 0.62, but notice the bid support slipped back to 0.60 on the top level. Buyers are there, just not sprinting. Meanwhile, draw liquidity tightened and asks dropped, so that's the sneaky counterattack market if the favorite stalls.
That's the trap. When the noise becomes the product, you stop playing the game and start performing around it. Hype can carry you for a spell, but sooner or later the ball demands truth, a clean touch, a real moment, no filler.
Yeah, that's a classic multiple expansion with no earnings growth story. Price levitates on narrative until the first miss. It's like a club with fireworks and a new kit launch, but the striker can't finish. Eventually, the crowd stops singing.
Because hope's a stubborn thing, mate. You keep...
Exactly. Once you get... Yep. Early at home is instant FOMO. Everyone starts playing like the win is priced in. The danger is overtrading, pushing too high, too fast, leaving space for a counter that hits like a surprise downgrade.
IMO, this feels like investor psychology, 4 years of hype, narrative over results. Jump in. How do you spot when you're just averaging down on hope instead of backing real performance?
We're basically unchanged. US still glued at 0.61, 0.62 with that giant 3.60 bid acting like a defensive line. But the upside feels capped with all that ass depth. Draw ticking down a hair and probability says the market's calm. No panic, just a slow grind.
That all is like a market gap up on earnings. Pure momentum and belief in one hit. Give us the sentiment swing angle. How does a crowd-fueled surge change the risk profile for the rest of the match? IMO, that opener is like a blue chip gap up at the bell. Crowd roaring, momentum screaming buy. How do you read the psychology when a team scores that early at home?
US is still pinned 0.61, 0.62, but notice the bid wall actually stepped up to 0.61. Buyers are defend got a 1-goal lead. Draw probability nudged higher, so the market's quietly pricing a bit more chaos without fully fading the favorite.
Home soil again, and you can feel the ghosts of '94 in the stands, only now it's a new generation with fresh legs and heavy expectations. This crowd isn't just watching, they're pushing, dragging, willing the U.S. forward inch by inch. Can they write their own a win, and it's straight through to the knockouts. No calculators, no prayers, just punch the ticket. And look at that weather hanging over the stadium like a curtain. Slick surface, quick ball, and one mistake could turn into a headline in a heartbeat. Big headline, Pulisic out, massive blue chip asset missing. Give us the market analogy. How does a team hedge when its star stock is suspended on match day?
Even with the star out headline, US pricing hasn't blinked. Still 0.61, 0.62. So the market's basically saying system over superstar. But bid depth just softened a touch, so if momentum turns, that draw 0.23 is the sneaky pressure valve.
That's it. Different opponent, different puzzle, but the same electricity in the building, and you can almost see it buzzing off the seats. If the US ride that wave early, Australia could be chasing shadows before they've even settled. Seattle can be the... You can feel it. This is more than 90 minutes. It's a whole stadium throwing a party in red, white, and blue. But the best fireworks have to be on the grass because celebrations are sweeter when the scoreboard joins in. Let's see if the US can light the fuse early. Seattle's in full parade mode, isn't it? Flags flying, voices up, the whole place ready to turn it into a national holiday. But the real celebration has to be earned between the lines. Give the crowd a goal, and this place will shake like a drum.
You're seeing a little risk-off creep into the middle, draw back to 23%, while US stays glued 0.61, 0.62, so traders are hedging the upset without dumping the favorite. Australia's ask depth ballooned again.
IMO, this is pure high-stakes pressure, home soil nerves, win and you're through vibes. Give us your market open take. How do players manage that volatility when everything's on the line?
Totally, this is like the opening bell on earnings day. Adrenaline's high, spreads widen, and one bad touch can gap the price. The best teams trade small early, keep shape, take the simple pass, let the game's liquidity build before they press. US is still the heavy favorite, and the bid 0.61 actually thickened. Buyers are defending that level like a back four protecting a one-goal lead. But the ask side is a wall, so upside looks capped unless we get a real catalyst, not just nerves.
You're not alone. This is the kind of day where the anthem hits and your skin's already celebrating. A World Cup is a furnace, but at home it's a bonfire, and every touch feels like it's got an echo. Now let's see who turns goosebumps into goals. Spot on. Give this crowd one early crunching tackle or a brave block and they'll lift the roof clean off. The danger is starting timid and letting the noise turn into nerves. First 5 minutes, set the tone, win your duels, and the stadium becomes your extra player.
We've got a slight wobble. US implied slips to 61%, even with that 0.61 bid holding, which tells you the market's pricing a bit more scrappy game risk. Meanwhile, Australia's top bid fell to 0.14. Support's backing away, so if the favourites stumble...
IMO, this don't get overhyped home World Cup vibe feels like managing volatility. Harness the crowd's energy without letting it spike into sloppy decisions. Got a quick market analogy for staying composed under massive national spotlight?
Exactly. Think of it like a pinned near a key support. You use the crowd as volume, not as a reason to chase. The composed teams stick to their process, keep risk tight, and wait for the clean breakout instead of forcing hero trades. Totally. Opening bell energy is great, but if you chase the first spike, you usually buy the top and look silly on replay. The smart side uses that volume to set a base, keep discipline, and let the move come to them.
Here we go. The anthem rolls out and you can feel the temperature drop. Everyone's suddenly locked in. This is that hush before the storm where legs stop bouncing and minds get razor sharp. Australia standing tall and the moment feels enormous.
Australia ticks down to 16% and the bid depth softens. Buyers are basically staying in the locker room. US stays steady 8.62% with that 0.61 wall, so sentiment is favored in control, but not enough conviction yet to punch through the 0.63 supply. We're seeing liquidity drain on the draw, and Australia books ask depth collapses there, while the US remains the big stable trade 0.61, 0.62. That's classic favorite control tape. Less hedging, more conviction.
And now the stars and stripes. Listen to that roar swell like a wave crashing over the stands. You can see it in the players' faces. Pride, nerves, fire, all of it. This is the kind of moment that makes your boots feel heavier and your heartbeat louder. America's anthem hangs in the air and the stadium's practically vibrating. This is pure electricity. You can feel the expectation pressing down like a heavyweight, but it can lift you too if you channel it right. Kickoff can't come soon enough.
Australia slips to 0.15, and that's the market quietly downgrading the upset. More sellers than believers, even with the spread tightening. US stays pinned at 61.62 with a big 0.63 offer, so we're Australia's top bid thins out and the ask stack stays massive. This is a book that's happy to sell the upset all day. Draw liquidity is easing on the offer, but price won't budge, and the US remains glued at 0.61 for 62 like a team protecting a... Not much new on price, but the US bid depth is creeping up while the offer stack is easing a touch. Buyers are slowly winning field position without scoring. Australia is still buried under that 0.9 sell wall, so any rally there looks like a counter. US ask depth just dropped meaningfully while the bid holds. Feels like the sellers are backing off, and that's how you set up a break higher if any catalyst hits. Australia's still stuck under heavy offers, so the upset money is basically taking low percentage shots.
IMO, the anthem vibes are through the roof. This feels like a market opening bell. If the US starts fast like they did last time, what's your early indicators checklist for momentum?
Absolutely, Leo. Anthem energy is the opening auction, but the real tell is whether buyers lift offers or just sit on the bid. I'm watching if that 0.63 sell wall gets chewed through and whether draw money leaks as the crowd abandons the hedge.
IMO, they're asking, what would you like the power to do? Give me a quick market-style metaphor for momentum here. US riding a rally from Paraguay or Australia coming in as the spoiler short seller.
Love it. US is the top seed with a steady uptrend, but they've got to break that overhead supply like punching through a stud resistance line. Australia's the classic short seller, one clean counter, and you get a nasty squeeze that makes everyone look silly.
IMO, the crowd's buzzing. Give me a quick market-style take. Is this US momentum a bullish trend, or are we due a nasty correction from Australia?
I'm leaning bullish trend for the US. The tape been sellers keep stepping back, which is classic buy the dips behavior. But if Australia lands one early punch, that's your correction candle. Fast, ugly, and fueled by everyone rushing to hedge. We're seeing a little risk-off creep. Bid depth is thinning across the board, even on the US, while price stays pinned 0.61, 0.62. Classic, nobody wants to chase tape. That's not bearish yet, but it's like a team slow.
IMO, that Bank of America power to do spot just hit. Crowd's buzzing, but the line about a lot of infection in there is wild. Give us the market angle. Brand risk or just meat fuel?
Order book's basically frozen. US still stuck 0.61, 0.62 with that big 0.63 ask wall, so bulls need real follow-through to break out. Meanwhile, Australia's got a mountain of offers up at 0.19, classic underdog supply overhang that caps any quick squeeze.
Howdy is just a friendly hello, partner, like a quick wave from the touchline, and I'm doing plenty. I'm strapped in for kickoff, waiting for the first crunching tackle or a lightning break to set this place on fire. IMO, it's a picture-perfect day in Seattle, and the broadcast is dripping with sponsors. Lay's, Bank of America, give us the quick market angle. Who's winning the ad game and why? Seattle's absolutely roaring. This place sounds like a jet engine at takeoff. Australia won't be phased, though. They love a scrap, and the US better match that noise with bite on the ball. Biggest day vibes in Seattle. US without their star. Pressure through the roof. Give us a quick market reaction angle. How does a key injury shift expectations and risk like a blue chip earnings miss?
Exactly, Leo. Losing the star is like a blue chip missing guidance. The base case survives, but the confidence premium gets marked down fast. You'll see hedges rotate into the draw and underdog, and volatility spikes because nobody trusts the lead.
No Pulisic, massive headline, and now someone else has to grab that spotlight with both hands. Freeze between the sticks again, and that backline's got to be ice cold because Australia will sniff any wobble like sharks. That stat is a warning siren. One slip and you're chasing shadows all afternoon. And Adams on a yellow, that's like playing with a glass ankle in midfield. He's got to tackle with his brain, not his boots. Adams flirting with suspension now. One more mistimed lunge and you're paying for it next match. And Pepe, wow, this is the moment. Droughts end in a heartbeat if he gets one clean look, but Beach is young and fearless.
Bid depth is creeping back in on Australia and the draw, but the offers are still stacked way up 80.99. Classic, I'll sell it only if it's a miracle positioning. US remains the anchor, AT 0.62, 0.6.
Australia sitting deep with skyscrapers at the back. This is going to be a lockpick job for the US. Patience and precision, or you're just crossing into traffic. And that LA buzz, you can feel it traveling up the coast. Now they've got to turn it into goals. You can feel the weight of the place, can't you? This city breathes football like it's in the bricks in the Bay Area. Nights like this, the crowd doesn't just watch, they push the ball forward with every roar.
Australia's bid depth just jumped, but notice the real support is still sitting way down at 0.05. So confidence is shallow, it's more toe in the water than full commitment. Meanwhile, US offers ballooned, so upside is getting capped like a team.
Seattle's a different kind of loud. This place doesn't cheer, it rumbles like the stadium's got an engine under it. If the fans get rolling early, the US will feel 10 feet tall, but they've got to give them something to sing about.
Australia just got nudged down a tick and the bid depth collapsed. Buyers backed away so that underdog trade is losing oxygen. US is still steady at 0.62, 0.63, but with those 0.99 asks looming, it's a tight pitch.
Oh, they'll come to crash it all right. Australia will sit in, scrap for every inch, and wait for one mistake to turn into a dagger. The US have to keep their heads, move it quick, and not let frustration do the defending for them. The stage is perfect. Blue skies, a crowd ready to lift the roof. It's got that something's about to happen feeling. Now the game's got to match it. Early tempo, brave runs, and a bit of magic to crack that stubborn wall. And we're off. Red, white, and stripes flying forward. Australia in that bright yellow like a warning sign. After last week's fireworks, you can feel the US fancy another show, but the Socceroos won't hand out invitations today. That Uruguay night was a statement like the US found a new gear and left skid marks all over the World Cup record book. But history's a hungry beast. It wants another bite today, and Australia will try to slam the fridge door shut. That Uruguay result still echoes. 4 goals a record, and suddenly the US are playing like they've got fireworks in their boots. But this is the next test. Can they turn one historic night into a habit with Australia snapping at their heels?
Australia's book looks healthier now. Top bid snapped back up to Grey Point Martrain, and depth improved, so the underdog is getting a little respect again. But the main story hasn't changed. US is still the heavy favorite, 80.62, 0.6.
Oh, that's a wake-up call straight away. One sloppy touch, and suddenly it's danger in the US box. But Freese answers the bell, first World Cup save, and you can almost hear the nerves exhale around the stadium. Australia smelled blood there. Toure turns on the jets, and suddenly it's a foot race with panic riding shotgun. The angle saves the US this time. Freese clamps it down at the near post, but that's a warning flare. Transitions are lethal tonight. You can feel it. Australia aren't here to admire the scenery. They've come with their sleeves rolled up and a grin on their face. This has that edge-of-the-seat energy already, like 2 teams racing for the same last train out of the group. Pepe leading the line in that 2-striker look. This is the US saying, we're not here to tiptoe, we're here to punch first. But with Australia flying in transition, those forwards have to press like madmen or it'll get messy fast. Robinson sniffing that run like a greyhound. Direct, aggressive, no messing about. And I love the US pressing high already, trying to set the tone. You're right, this one's got scrap in a phone booth written all over it. Australia's playing like a value investor. Happy with low possession, waiting for the high percentage counter and cashing in. Any market analogy on teams thriving without controlling the ball?
Absolutely. It's like a low beta stock in a risk on tape. You don't need to lead the index, you just need one catalyst and you gap up while everyone else is over-levered. Possession is volume, counters are price discovery.
Australia with 29% and still winning 2-0. That's pure smash and grab artistry. They're happy living off scraps and turning them into steak. They'll let the US have the ball, then spring like a trapdoor the moment a pass gets sloppy. Robinson pushing on gives the US that extra blade out wide, and you can see Tillman ticking in to stir the midfield like a spoon in hot coffee. McKennie's already trying to thread the needle. One clean connection, and Australia's block could wobble.
Totally. This is the classic short volatility until the one spike pays you trade. You look boring for 80 minutes, then one catalyst prints the whole P&L. The crowd chases possession like momentum, but Australia's playing mean reversion and nicking the goal. Big rebound and draw liquidity. Bid depth jumped, and the top bid's now sitting right 8.022. So the market's suddenly willing to play for extra time. US still has the favorite price, but that ask wall thickened, so upside looks capped. Australia's bid stack is back at 0.13, so the underdog floor is getting defended again, less air pocket risk than a minute ago. Draw liquidity cooled but still respectable, 0.222, 0.23, while the US remains the heavy favorite.
Oh, you can feel that question hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Pulisic changes the tenor of a match instantly. Without him, the US needs someone else to grab the steering wheel in the final third and drive them forward. No Pulisic, so the US have to improvise. New faces, new shapes, and it's a different kind of bite up top. Two strikers staring down a back three is like throwing a match into dry grass. One spark, and it's chaos.
Australia's still pinned at 14-15%, but that ass depth ballooning tells you sellers are camped out. Any rally is going to feel like running into a packed defense. The draw book looks shakier with the real support down at 0.07, so if momentum swings, it could drop fast.
That's the update everyone's clinging to. Good progress, but no boots on the grass today, and that's a gut punch for the US. You can almost hear the fans doing the math in their heads. Who becomes the spark now? That hurts. When a player's done everything and still can't go, it's like being stuck in the tunnel while the lights come on outside. You can tell it's eating at them, and the US have to turn that frustration into fuel right now. That's leadership, isn't it? If he can't light the fuse on the pitch, he's trying to do it from the bench with a hug and a few sharp words. Pepe will feel that, and sometimes that little push is worth a yard in the box.
Australia just ticked up a cent to 0.15, 0.16. Notice the real bid support is way down at 0.05, so this is more lift than conviction. Draw and Australia are both staring at massive sell walls, while the US book stays the deepest and calmest 80s. Totally, when the blue chip's out, you don't YOLO the whole book into one small cap striker. The smarter portfolio is diversified width and service because one Pepe miss, and the draw trade suddenly looks like it's back in the game.
McKennie peeling wide like he's got a license to roam, and he brings it down with real intent. Instead of forcing it, he whips that cross in. Now it's chaos time in the box. Who's brave enough to attack it? Whistle kills a dangerous Robinson chance. US flagged for a foul in the box area. Feels like a momentum swing. Be your market reaction take on how teams respond when a big opportunity gets wiped out.
Yeah, that's like a breakout candle that gets instantly rejected. Crowd groans and traders get jumpy. You often see a quick volatility spike. The attacking side overpresses to win it back, while the other team gains belief and starts taking risk on the count. This is risk off across the board. Australia and the draw bid depth just got gutted, like the crowd leaving early, while the US stays propped up at 0.62, 0.63. That big 0.60 bid is still the anchor, but no. We've got a little liquidity breathing back in, but it's still one-way traffic. US holds 0.62, 0.63, while Australia's support is basically a mirage down at 0.03. The draw.
Yeah, that's the classic two-striker picture. One knifing to the near post, the other ghosting right over the shoulder, and defenders hate that split-second decision. If the service is sharp, it's either a flick, a tap-in, or pure panic clearance.
US probability nudges up to 63%, but the book's flashing a weird tell. That top bid down BY01 looks like a phantom layer, while real support still feels like 0.60. Australia bids are thin again, so there's no real upset demand.
Oh, that's sloppy, and you can feel the stadium inhale. Richards gets squeezed, and suddenly it's gift-wrap danger. Those are the moments that flip a match on its head. The US have to calm it down or they'll get punished.
Now that's a real momentum rip. US jumps to 0.68, 0.69, and Australia gets absolutely drained. Bid depth down to basically pocket change. This is the market sprinting into the favorite like a team protecting a late lead, and the upset side has no buyers to.
Absolutely, Imo. Those giveaways are like bad trades. You're instantly underwater, and the pressure spikes. Australia smell it the moment you're facing your own net, and they pounce in packs trying to force that one panicked touch. The US need cleaner exits, or it's going to get noisy. Australia are turning those presses into real territory. Suddenly, it's all happening in the US half, and you can feel the squeeze. Pepe's hunting like a terrier, but Sutar uses that big frame and just rolls it off to Hatridge. Baptism. He's only 22, but he's playing like a seasoned enforcer out there. Every touch has weight, every duel leaves a mark. Australia will feed off that kind of presence because one monster night can drag a whole team up by the collar.
US is still priced like the match is basically over at 0.79, 0.80, but notice the draw has a chunky sell wall sitting right on say Y14. Someone's capping any scrappy stalemate narrative. Australia's down at 5% and the bid depth is still tiny, so any
8 saves and a clean sheet. Those are goalkeeper numbers that make strikers groan in their sleep, but that last bit of promise just fizzles with a loose touch, and you can hear the US bench sigh as the momentum leaks away. Big collision. Adams down after Lecky's crunching challenge. If he can't continue, that's a massive swing in both momentum and pricing. Worth flagging how markets react to an injury sub.
Yeah, that's the kind of headline that makes the book flinch. An injury sub is like losing your quarterback mid-drive, spreads widen, and liquidity pulls back. If Adams is off, expect the US price to wobble first, then snap to a new level once the replacement settles.
Adams down after a crunching Lecky challenge. This is the kind of injury scare that swings momentum and sentiment instantly, like a blue chip taking a sudden hit on bad news.
Yeah, refs absolutely price in game control early. Show a card and you cool volatility, let it go, and you invite a choppy, emotional market. If that's missed, you often see the underdog press harder and the favorite get dragged into a scrap.
IMO, that's a crunching late challenge. No yellow when the ball's gone. Feels like the ref's setting a risky market tone early. What do you make of that decision and its impact on the game's volatility? Adams is the heartbeat out there, and you can feel the whole tempo wobble when he's on the turf. Lecky's come in late, the ball's long gone. How's that not yellow in a World Cup scrap? Big leadership moment now. Get up, reset, and drag the team forward. Yeah, that mental edge is everything, Amo. When your captain's clipped like that, it's not just a leg, it's the team's confidence taking a hit. If Adams shakes it off, the US surge comes right back like a market rebound after bad news. Adams mentality talk. We have to compete. Feels like a trader's discipline under pressure. Got a quick analogy for staying composed after a hard hit? What a bad headline.
Exactly. After a bad headline, the pros don't revenge trade. They reset the shape, take the simple pass, and wait for the next high-quality setup. Same here. Absorb the hit, keep structure, and let the game come back to you. Yeah, that's the stick-to-the-process mindset. When the tape gets wild, you don't chase every candle, you execute your plan and protect downside. Compete means stay in the match through the rough patches so you're there when momentum finally flips.
Oh, that's slick from McKennie, gliding inside like he's got the ball on a string, and Adams just muscles through the contact. Proper bite. The shot smothered, bodies flying in, and the US are starting to turn the screw here.
US is still the clear favorite at 81%, but you can feel the market getting top-heavy. Bid depth is thinning while the price won't break higher, like a team camped in the final third without the killer pass. Australia's book is basically all air on. Draw just ticked up a point and the spread widened to 0.14, 0.15, but look at that bid depth, only about 5K, so it's a flimsy move, more noise than narrative. US is still stuck at 0.80, 0.81 with bids and asks
Yeah, that's the clever stuff. He's not just running, he's ghosting into pockets at the exact moment defenders blink. And that Dest connection on the right is pure mischief. One overlaps, one underlaps, and suddenly Australia are chasing shadows. McKennie and Dest are in sync like a double act. One touch, one burst, and the defense is instantly on the back foot. He cushions it, scrambles it back, and keeps the rhythm ticking through Adams. You can feel the US probing for that one clean incision.
That US sell side just got heavier again. Ask depth north of 600K and the big wall now sitting up at 892, so upside's capped unless buyers bring fresh legs. Australia and draw bids are still creeping in, like the underdog finally winning a few second balls, which.
What a journey, eh? Air Force roots, Germany in the blood, and now he's bossing the tempo out here like he owns the place. Doesn't matter where the memories are, the moment's right now, and he's playing like a man with something to prove. It's got that homecoming feel, doesn't it? Every touch carries a little extra spark when the crowd can claim you, and Dest on that flank is just itching to light the fuse again. You can sense the next burst of danger building.
Draw ask depth just exploded to about 692K, while US ask depth eased back to high 520K. So the market's basically saying draw protection is expensive. but it's there. US still holds 5.80, 0.81, yet with that big shift here. Draw and Australia liquidity just evaporated on the bid side, while the US market firmed up to 0.81 on 0.82 with a much cleaner balanced book. That's momentum traders piling back into the favorite, like the crowd sensing the counter. We're seeing a full-on retreat in the long-shot markets. Australia and draw bid depth got gutted, so nobody wants to stand in front of that train right now. Meanwhile, the US stays pinned 80810.82 with lighter offers, like the favorite calmly seeing out the match. Now, the US book is getting downright comfy. Bid depth jumps over 308K while offers shrink to 171K, so buyers are controlling the tempo. But notice that top ask parked AT 0.99. That's the park the bus wall if sentiment suddenly flips. Here comes the hedge wave. Draw bid depth just snapped back to 26K and US offers balloon to 450K, even as price only ticks 2082.0.83. That's classic protect the lead behavior. Nobody's fading the US, they're just buying insurance in case. Australia and the draw are getting some fresh bids. Aussie top bid up to 0.04 and draw depth holding north of 25K, so the insurance trade is still on. But the US side is now heavy with supply 80.84, like the favorite trying to slow the game and draw just tightened 2.12, 0.13, and the ask stack is massive, 769K. So there's a ton of sell the draw supply waiting to fade any panic. US is still swamped 82 wa 0.83, but that 0.84 wall keeps capping upside, like a team lead. That's a liquidity air pocket. US bid depth just fell hard to about 202K, and the draw's ask stack got chopped too, so the market's pulling orders and waiting. Price hasn't moved yet, but when the book thins like this, one decent hit can swing it like a late counterattack. US bid depth keeps bleeding, down to 181K, while the offer side stays fat, so the favorite's price is being held up more by belief than by fresh buying. Meanwhile, the draw book is getting weird with that big bid sitting down at 0.04. US bids are still retreating, down to 167K, while the sell wall just stepped up to 0.85, so upside is getting boxed in even with the win prob holding 83%. And the draw ask depth exploding back to 759K screen. We're basically in a stalemate. US still pinned 8.82.83, but the bid support is thin and the 0.85 offer wall is sitting there like a parked bus. Draw liquidity is still stacked on the sell side, so any uh-oh moment likely gets faded fast. US is starting to look top heavy. Bid depth slid again to 146K, while asks ballooned to 579K. So any negative in-game swing could knock this price down quicker than people expect. It's like the crowd's still chanting USA. Now that's a little stabilization for Team USA. Bid depth rebounds to 177k, and the ask stack lightens to 417k. Plus, the top offer slips back to 0.984. Australia's ask depth just ballooned though, so nobody's buying the upset story. Leo, the US book just went in on bids. Depth collapsed to I31k, while price still sits 0.8 to 0.83. Feels like a nervous crowd. One Australia chance, and this could gap fast. Give us the momentum.
Spot on the pitch, it's the same shaky floor. US have the ball, but Australia's counters are one clean pass from panic. Crowds humming, but you can feel a swing coming. Next big chance could flip everything in a heartbeat.
Absolutely, Leo. Possession without protection is a classic trap, and the tape here agrees with that US bid depth collapsing to about 31k. When the book gets that thin, one scary counter is like a red card for sentiment. Suddenly there's the wobble. US ticks down to 0.80, 0.81 and the win prop slips, while Australia and the draw both firm up a notch. With US bid depth still skinny, this feels like a team protecting a one-goal lead with tired legs. One break and the price gaps. US is still priced like the favorite 0.80 or 0.81, but the support underneath is fading again. Bid depth down near 33k, so it's a thin ice rally. Australia's top bid stepping up to 0.04 is that little momentum shift, like a team finally winning second balls. You're seeing the market lean into not over yet. Draw widens to 0.4 or 0.5, and Australia holds 0.05, 0.06, while the US stays pinned 0.8 or 0.81. The tell is that heavy 0.99 offer wall. Now that's a real shift in posture. US firms 2.81, 0.82, and more importantly, bid depth explodes to about 149k. Someone just brought fresh legs off the bench. Australia softens back to 0.04, 0.05. US stays steady 0.81 or 0.82 with that big 150k bid cushion still underneath. This is the market saying the favorites back in control. Draw liquidity is creeping up too, but Australia's bid slips like they've stopped winning those transition jewels. Not much drama. US is still camped at 0p81, 0.82, and that bid depth only eases slightly, so the floor is holding. The draw book is quietly getting sturdier at the top bid, but Australia remains a low liquidity punt with that giant 0.99 sell wall looming. US pricing is unchanged, but the story is the depth. Bids are back near 150k while asks keep stacking, so it's a controlled grind rather than a breakout. Draw and Australia are basically side markets right now. No one's stepping up to take the armband from the favorite. Here's the tension. US still 0.81, 0.82, but the ask side just ballooned to about 471k. Big supply overhead like defenders lining up at the top of the box. Bulls have a stronger bid pad at 155k, but they'll need a clean goal event to punch. US ticked up to 0.82 to 0.83 with bid depth jumping to 179K, while ask still heavy on 452K. Feels like momentum turning. Can you frame it like sustained pressure versus a packed defense? And what kind of event would break the wall?
Yeah, that's exactly it. US pressure building, but Australia's sitting in a low block with bodies everywhere, soaking it up like a big cell wall. The breaker is one sharp through ball or a set piece scramble, one messy bounce, and the whole thing cracks open.
Now we've got a little lift. US ticks up to 0.82, 0.83, and bid depth is firm around 180K, so buyers are pressing higher up the pitch. But that 452K ask stack is still a parked bus. Unless it thins out, upside is a grind, not a sprint. That's a real momentum shift. US bid depth just jumped to about 265K, while price holds 0.82, 0.83. Buyers are crowding the box. But both Australia and the draw just got flooded with ask depth north of 6. US just inched up again to 0.83, 0.84, and the win prob ticks 84%. But notice the sell wall migrating higher. Top ask now sitting way up at 0.95, like the market's daring buyers to keep chasing. Meanwhile, the draw is still drowning in offers. US stays pinned at 0.83, 0.84, but bid depth reloaded to about 238K, while the ask side eased a bit. Buyers are still controlling midfield. The draw's ask wall is back above 600K, so the market's basically saying, we're not paying up for chaos today. Draw odds just softened a touch, win prob down to 13%, and you can see why. That draw ask depth finally came in from the 600K area to about 508K, so the parking the bus pressure is easing. US is still steady, 80.830. Big change in the plumbing. US ask depth just collapsed to about 263K, and the nearest sell wall is only 0.85 now, so it's suddenly a much cleaner runway if buyers step on it. At the same time, the draw tightened to 0.11. Liquidity just vanished on the long shots. Australia and the draw bid depth collapsed, so those prices can gap on a sneeze. US stays 8.3, 8.4 with a relatively light 8.5 offer, meaning if any fresh buying shows up, it's a quick tap in higher. US is still camped 8083.84, but the sell side keeps thinning. Ask depth down again to about 236K, and that zone 85 wall is smaller, so one decent buy sweep could pop this. Australia and draw bids are basically Australia's ask depth just ballooned to roughly 708K. Someone's building a massive no upset wall, even as the price ticks back to 1.04, 0.05. US remains steady, 80.83, 0.84 with manageable. Now, the US book is the story. Ask depth got cut to about 153K, so there's less resistance overhead, even if the quote hasn't moved yet. Meanwhile, Australia bids are basically non existent. Top bid at 0, so that side's like a team with no midfield, one shot. There's your momentum shift. US ticks up to 0.84.85 and the draw slips to 0.12. Money's leaning harder into the favorite, less respect for extra time. It's like the US just won the midfield battle. Now the market's pricing a cleaner win. US is holding that higher range, and the bid depth just refilled north of 200K, so buyers are defending the lead like they're protecting a one-goal advantage late. Draw keeps leaking to 11%, and Australia's still a thin, fragile book. Any real sell? That's a big liquidity tell. US ask depth just swelled to roughly 485K, and the nearest real wall is way up at T0.95. So someone's parking a bus and capping upside. Australia's spread tightens to 0.0. Australia's offer stack just got even heavier. Ask depth up around 715K, so any rally there is running straight into a brick wall. US stays pinned 80.84, 0.85 with decent bids, but the market's basically saying we're seeing a little de-risking. US bid depth slid to about 168K, so the support under 0.84 looks less sturdy if any bad news hits. The draw book is getting more real with that big bid up at 0.1. Markets quietly paying for the upset script. Tiny but telling. US win prob ticks down a hair to 84%, even though prices stuck 0.8440.85. Classic same scoreline, but nerves rising. And Australia's ask depth is still enormous. Liquidity just evaporated on the long shots. Australia and the draw bid depth got yanked hard, so it's no one wants to catch that falling knife story. Meanwhile, US looks cleaner with ask depth down near 192K, but that's 0.99. Underdog bids came back a bit, Australia depth up to about 2.7K and draw bids to 15K. So someone's nibbling again, but it's still tiny versus those monster sell walls. US ask depth reinflated to 226K, which tells you the favorites trade is getting Now the books are re-thickening on the upset side, draw bids up to 16K and Australia back near 2.8K, so the insurance buyers are back in the stadium. But US ask depth just swelled over 305K, which is that classic late game time wasting. Leo, the market's suddenly pricing more scrappy game. Draw bid, ask just jumped to 0.1 with bid depth near 29K, while US win prob slips to 84% and a huge sell wall.
I see it. US looks like they're trying to manage the clock, but that's when you start backing off and the other side smells blood. One sloppy clearance, one cheap foul, and suddenly you're defending your own box like it's a last-ditch trade gone wrong.
We just saw the panic hedge cool off, draw bid slips back to 0.11, and Australia's back to 4% with thinner bids, so the crowd's drifting right back to the favorite. US stays pinned 80 0.84, 0.85, but that heavy Australia and the draw are getting a little more respect. Bid depth is rebuilding and the draw's back 2.1 on the bid, so hedgers are stepping in again. But the US is still the heavy favorite, and that big 99 sell wall is like draw ticks up to 13%, and you can see the market paying for protection again, but it's still all small ball compared to the favorite. The real tell is US bid depth jumping to 222K while asks stay heavy. Buyers are pressing, yet there's a big defense. That draw book just got chunky on the sell side. Top ask sitting right at 0.13 with size, so rallies in the draw are getting met immediately. Meanwhile, US stays glued at 0.84, 0.85 with heavy overhead supply, so it's a stalemate. Now, the US book is wearing a real helmet. Ask depth balloons, and there's a fat wall right on 3.85, so anyone chasing upside is running into a brick backline. Australia ticks toe 5%, but it's still a penny stock vibe. The only US win prob slips a hair to 84%, but price won't budge because that 0.85 ask wall is still massive. Classic favorite fatigue without a real breakdown. Draw stays pinned 8 0.12 0.13, so the market's basic. Draw bids just stepped up. 0.11 is getting real size now, so the market's quietly paying up for the anything can happen outcome. But the US line is still stuck under that 0.85 supply wall, so until that gets chewed through, it's possession without penetration. We're seeing a little more respect for the draw with that waypoint Woven bid stack holding, but the ask side is still a mountain 8-0-8-1-3, so it's capped. US remains the heavy favorite, yet that same 0.85 wall is like a parked bus until it breaks up. Now that's a shift. US ask depth just thinned hard and the top offer even nudges up to 0.86, which tells you sellers stepped back and the path higher is less crowded. Draws ask stack also lightens, so volatility. Leo, the book just went super thin on bids for Australia and the draw. Liquidity vanished like a crowd leaving early, while US asks jumped to 0.99. Can you riff on how momentum shifts when the market parks the bus and everyone pulls orders?
Oh, that's the classic park the bus panic. Everyone drops 10 men behind the ball and the space just disappears, so nobody wants to commit. But when the book goes thin like that, one sudden counter or deflection is a sucker punch that can flip the whole stadium mood instantly.
Liquidity just fell off a cliff on Australia and the draw. Bids are basically ghosting, so any real sell pressure could gap these prices fast. US still sits at 0.84, 0.85, but with that 0.99 offer show. US price just ticked up to 0.85, 0.86, while AUS bid slipped to 0.03 and draw liquidity looks thin. Feels like momentum trade with a fragile book. Can you frame this like a late game push where the favorite pins the underdog back but one counter could swing?
Absolutely. This is the favorite camping in the final third, squeezing the life out of the underdog and forcing rushed clearances. But with a fragile book, it's like defending on a knife edge. One clean turnover and a lightning counter can flip belief in a heartbeat.
Big tell here, US probability ticks down and the bid depth collapses from six figures to about 36K. Buyers just stepped off the pitch. With the spread tightening to 0.83, 84, it's fragile. One decent sell. US just reasserts control, price up to 0.87, 0.88, and the draw gets marked down to single digits, so the market's basically calling this a one-way match. But don't ignore the thin bid depth on all three outcomes. It's a lead, not a lock, and one headline can... Now we're in garbage time pricing, US up at 0.90, 0.92, and the draw crushed to 67 cents, so the crowd's piling into the favorite like it's protecting a late lead. But that wall on US is massive versus thin bids, so upside is capped and any wobble... US is getting priced like a team up 2 goals in stoppage time, 0.93, 0.94, with the drawdown at a nickel. But the book's still lopsided. Thin bids and chunky asks mean late buyers are paying a premium, and any surprise momentum swing will hurt fast. That's a real momentum shove. US up to 0.95, 0.96, and more importantly, bid depth jumps back to 145K. Buyers are back in the stands singing. Australia's basically pinned at a penny, so the only trade left is managing late game risk versus paying up for... This is the market parking the bus behind Team USA, still 0.94, 0.95, but bid depth balloons to 254K, so there's real support under the favorite now. Australia at a penny with a mountain of asks is basically no one believes, and the only drama left is a freak... US is basically a 96% favorite now, and the key tell is that bid depth has exploded to nearly 380K. There's a real supporters section underneath this price. Draw in Australia are getting iced out, but AT 0.95, 0. We've got fresh late money chasing the US. That new 150K size bullish clip 80.92 is like a striker coming on just to waste time in the corner. Price stays pinned 0.95 slide 0.96, but withdraw liquidity. Now the favorite tightens again. US ticks up 2.96, 0.97, and the ask side thins, so sellers are backing away. That's classic late game, protect the lead pricing. Upside is pennies, but if anything weird happens, the drop is an elevator. US stays glued at 0.96, 0.97, but notice the draw bid depth just collapsed. Hedgers are stepping off the field, which usually means confidence is rising. Still, with US bid depth easing from the highs, any sudden headline could make this spread. Draw just tightened 20.03, but it's a mirage. There's barely any real bid behind it and a skyscraper of asks up top, so one shove and it snaps back. Meanwhile, US is still 0.96, 0.97 with heavier sell side. That's a real shift. US price holds 80.96, 0.97, but bid depth just got cut in half while the ask stack stays fat. Support is thinning. Feels like the crowd's still chanting easy win, but the market's quietly taking chips off the table. We're seeing the US bid depth rebuild a bit, but the market's still leaning defensive with that chunky ask overhead. Nobody's paying up beyond 0.97. And the draw is back to a clean 0.3, 0.03, like a scrappy counterattack. US market just went 0.96, 0.96 with a massive ask wall, a 500K at 0.97 and total asks ballooning. Feels like the crowd's trying to lock in the win, but liquidity's one-sided. Can you frame this like a team parking the bus and inviting late chaos?
Bang on. This is the team dropping deep to protect the lead. Everyone behind the ball trying to see it out, but that one-sided weight is dangerous. One late corner, one ricochet, and chaos storms through like a last-minute equalizer.
US is now locked 80.96, 0.96, but look at that massive sell wall sitting 80.97. This is the market parking the bus and daring buyers to break it down. Draw liquidity is creeping up again, so some traders are quietly buying chaos insurance. US is still pinned at 0.96, but that ask depth north of 700K is a real ceiling. Buyers are basically trying to score against a packed 6-yard box. And the draw spread widens again to 0.03, 0.04, so liquidity's getting... Now the US bid depth slips under 200K while the sell side still dominates. Price is stable, but it's stability with training wheels. Meanwhile, the draw bid depth jumps and the top bid size balloons. So someone's positioning for a nervy zero stretch where one... That US price is still glued at 0.96, but the sell side just swelled to nearly 850K. Classic late game time wasting from holders trying to exit without moving the scoreline. Draw liquidity just evaporated on the bid, so if anything goes weird, it'll be a sharp. Big tell here. US bid depth just got cut to about 100K, while the ask side balloons to 900K. Price says 96%, but the tape says nobody wants to pay up. That's like a team up 2-0 suddenly refusing to cross midfield. Any pressure and you can get a quick. Now that's a momentum flip. US ask depth collapses from the 900K area down to about 226K, and the best offer pops up to 0.98. Sellers stepped back. That's like the favorite finally pushing the back line up. If bids keep building, 0.97. And just like that, the US sell wall reloads. Ask depth back up to 635K with a chunky 0.97 offer, so upside is capped again. The draw book is getting more tradable with size showing AT0.04, which screams hedging. US bids are firming, depth up to 315K, but that 400K block sitting at 0.97 is basically a defender parked on the goal line, stopping any clean break higher. Australia's book is pure noise at a penny with a massive stack, so the real action is still US versus draw hedging. US liquidity just softened again. Bid depth flips back toward 271K, while asks creep up to 665K, so that 0.97 wall still has the high ground. This is a classic protect the lead market. Everyone expects the US to win, but nobody. Draw just ticked wider to someone 030.04 with bid depth jumping to 4K. Someone's probing for a hedge, but liquidity's still thin. Meanwhile, US stays pinned 80.96 with that 0.97 sell wall, so it's stalemate football. Lots of possession, no shots on goal. US bid depth just perked back up over 320K, but the market's still staring at that 400K offer, 80.97, like it's a brick wall. Hard to rally through. Draw liquidity cooled back down, so the insurance trade is fading a bit and confidence in the Australia ask depth just came in, down near 11M. So a bit of that junk liquidity is getting pulled, but price still glued to a penny. US remains the main event, steady 0.96 with big depth on both sides, and that Now we're seeing a little air come out of the US bid stack down to 277K, while asks ease too, so it's more wait and see than panic. Draw depth is creeping higher again, which tells you some traders are quietly buying insurance. That draw bid stack just surged to nearly 5K, and the top bid 80.02 tripled in size. Someone's building a hedge position, no question. At the same time, the US bid depth pops back above 330K, so the favorite's still in control, but the crowd's buying. Draw bids are still stacked near 5K, and that 0.02 level is loaded, so the hedge crowd hasn't left the stadium yet. But US bid depth slid back toward 271K, while price stays frozen 80.96. That draw hedge just got yanked. Bid depth drops from 55K to 3.1K, and the big 0.02 stack evaporates, so the market's leaning back into no drama. US stays pinned 0.96 with lighter bids, meaning confidence is there, but nobody. Draw just tightened, ass down to 0.03, so somebody's trying to make the stalemate trade more tradable, even if the depth still sits heavy on the offer. Meanwhile, US asks balloon to 701K with that 0.97 wall looming. So Australia bid depth ticks up a bit, but it's still a penny stock with a skyscraper of offers, pure long shot lottery ticket. The real story is the US still glued at 0.96, while the sell side stays thick near 0.97. So this is a We're basically in a holding pattern. US bid depth nudges back up to 271K, but price won't budge off 0.96 with that 0.97 supply sitting like a packed defense. Draw liquidity is still thin on the bid, so any real scare would gap it fast. Here comes the hedge again. Bid depth snaps back to wall 4.9K, and that 0.02 level is reloaded, so traders are buying insurance like it's stoppage time. US is still stuck at 0.96 with heavy offers above, so the favorite's winning, but the crowd's bracing for a weird bounce. That draw bid support just vanished again, back to a ghost bid at 0.00. So the insurance buyers are stepping off the pitch. US remains welded to a 0.96 with the same 0.97 wall, so it's calm, but it's also one headline away from a quick reprice. And just like that, the draw buyers sprint back on. Bid depth jumps to about 4.9K with size parked at 0.02. Classic hedge the upset behavior. US still can't clear that 0.97 sell wall, so the favorites draw just tightened to 0.04, 0.04, so someone's basically saying, I'll take it right here, and that's a little pulse of nerves in the tape. Meanwhile, US bid depth slips to 254K while asks swell, so the favorite's still leading, but the market's getting a bit more defensive. US buyers just showed up again. Bid pops to roughly 294K, so the favorite's back in control even if the price is still glued at 0.96. Draw stays pinned 80.04, 0.04, which tells you the market's hedging, but US bid depth keeps climbing, now north of 311K, so there's real support under the favorite, even with the price stapled at say 0.96. Draw is still locked 8 ISO 4, meaning the market's playing cautious defense, not launching an upset attack. Tiny wobble. US bid depth dips back under 284K while the ask side thickens. So buyers are taking a breather even though the quote won't budge off 0.96. Draw stays nailed 80.04. Like both teams passing sideways in midfield, waiting. Now you're seeing a bit of rotation into the draw. Bid depth ticks up to about 4.4K while US support fades to tight 256K, even though the quote's still stuck 80.96. That's the crowd buying insurance. Favorite still ahead on the scoreboard. Big swing back to the US side. Bid depth jumps to about 404K, so the favorites got fresh muscle behind it, even with the price frozen 8.96. Draw interest is steady, but this looks like the market stepping on the gas after a brief lull. US support cools a touch, bid depth slips to high 369K from that spike, but it's still a big cushion under 0.96, so the favorite isn't wobbling yet. Australia and the draw remain basically parked, which screams no new information, just traders. There it is. The US bid finally blinks down to 0.95 while offers stay at 0.96. So we've got a tiny crack in the sure thing narrative. But with 410K sitting on the bid, that's still a packed defense. It'll take real selling to turn this into a rout the other way. US is still stuck with that 0.95, 0.96 spread, but the bid depth just slid to 3 and a V4K. Support's thinning, not collapsing. Meanwhile, draw bids are creeping up, so some money's hedging like it's the 85th minute and nobody wants to concede late. US buyers just reloaded, bid depth back up near 410K, yet the spread stays 0.95, 0.96, so confidence is there but not cocky. Draw liquidity is quietly improving too, like the underdog pressing without scoring. That's your tail risk. Not much new on price, US still 0.95, bid 0.96 ask. But the sell wall thickened a bit, asks up to about 667K, so upside feels capped for now. This is classic heavy favorite crowded trade. Everyone wants in, but nobody wants to pay up. US bid depth just dropped back to 351K while the ask side stays fat around 6 and 65K. So the market's leaning favorite wins, but it's getting a little top heavy. If that 0.95 bid gives way, you could see a quick air pocket like a counterattack off a sloppy. US still 0.95, 0.96, but bid depth just fell hard to 256K while asks stay heavy. 657K feels like the favorites backline stepped up and left space for a sudden counter. Can you frame this momentum shift / crowd psychology and match? Now that's a little momentum shift. US just ticked up to 0.96 and the spread basically vanished, but bid depth is only what, 247K, thin ice under a pricey favorite. Draw bids also jumped, so the crowd's paying for insurance while the favorites' odds get squeezed. US couldn't hold that -6 0.96 print back to 95 0.96, so the push higher got stuffed pretty quickly. Draw bid depth just cooled off too, which tells you the insurance buyers stepped back. Markets settling into a slow, controlled possession game. Australia bid depth just got yanked down to about wall 27K. Nobody's even pretending to back the upset. It's pure lottery ticket territory. US stays pinned 8 0.95 0.96 with a big ask stack, so it's a heavy favorite walking the. US bid depth just refilled to about 299K while the ask stack eased a touch. Buyers are stepping back in to defend that 0.95 line, but the draw ask wall just got thicker, so any wobble in game in that nil-nil fear trade can light up fast. There's the squeeze again. US back to a clean 0.96, 0.96, so sellers blinked and the favorites getting marked up. But notice bid depth actually slipped while the price rose. So this is more thin air rally than overwhelming conviction. One bad bounce and it can gap. Big change here. The US ask depth just collapsed from wall to roughly 266K, and that's like the defense stepping upfield. Suddenly there's room for a quick break higher if buyers press. Meanwhile, Australia and the draw are showing goofy. Now the US bid depth just got cut about 172K, while price stays 0.95, 0.96. Classic scoreboard pressure without bodies behind it. If any real selling shows up, there's less cushion, and that. US liquidity just flipped. Ask depth is now lighter than bids, about 203K versus 219K. So the path of least resistance is actually up if someone hits the gas. Still, price won't budge off 0.95, 0.9. US is back to a more balanced book, bids around 206K, asks 237K, so that 0.95, 0.96 range looks like a real stalemate, not a breakout setup. The draw and Australia still have those weird soy 999 phantom walls, so that's a subtle but important tilt. US bids now edge the asks 239K versus 231K, while price stays pinned 8.95, 0.96. Buyers are quietly winning field position. If that 0.97 offer stack keeps we're seeing a little wobble. US bid depth slipped under 200K while asks rebuilt to 254K, so upside gets tougher unless fresh buyers step in. And the draw bid ticking down to 0.03 is like the crowd quietly leaving early. US is getting top heavy, bid depth down to 186K while asks swell to 264K, so any negative headline and this can slip a tick fast. The draw bid holding at 0.3 says the market's still pricing a small scrappy zero risk, but it's not getting paid up. Buyers just showed back up on the US side. Bid depth jumps to about 239K, but asks are still heavier at 261K, so it's like pushing uphill in the final third. Also note that new reducing long print 8.95. Some folks are taking profit, not pressing. Now the US price ticks up to 0.96, 0.97, but liquidity underneath is thinning. Bid depth down near 180K versus 258K on the offer, so it's a lead that can get nervy. And the draw tightening 2003, 0.03 with tiny bid depth. US win prob nudges up to 97%, but the book's getting more one-sided on the sell wall. Asks up near 278K versus 190K bids, so you're paying up for certainty. Australia and draw both have these comically huge 0.99 offer stack. That's a real shift. US asks just collapsed to about 113K while bids hold 182K. So the path of least resistance is higher. Markets basically saying, stop time, blow the whistle. Meanwhile, draw liquidity evaporates on. And just like that, the US sell wall reloads, asks back up to 274K, while bids slip to 165K, so the market's not letting you sprint to the finish line for free. This is classic late game time wasting. Price stays high, but liquidity says one bad. There's the squeeze. US ticks up to 0.97, 0.98, and the offer side is thin, only about 86K of asks versus 150K bids, so it wouldn't take much to push this towards 0.99. Draw bids just fell out of bed to $341. That's one counterattack, and the US stays priced like a heavy favorite, 80, 0.96, 0.97, and the bid stack is still thicker than the offers, 170K versus 108K. So buyers are defending the lead. But the draw drifting down to 2% with almost no bid. Now we're basically at a locked market on the US, 8, 0.97, 0.97. Everyone's leaning the same way, but nobody wants to blink first. The draw bid depth bounced a bit, yet it's still thin enough that a single headline could move it like a deflection in the box. US loosens back to 0.96, 0.97, but the tape still looks supported. 166K bid depth versus 103K on the ask, so dips are getting bought. Draw liquidity is still a puddle, so any surprise momentum swing would reprice that faster than I can mispronounce. US snaps back to a tight 0.97, 0.97, and the order book's still bid heavy, 162K bids versus 99K asks. So the market's basically parking the bus in the lead. Meanwhile, Australia and the draw are just giant 0.99 sell. US is still pinned 8, 0.97 with a chunky bid stack, 172K bids versus 106K asks. So the market's treating this like a game being managed out. Australia bid depth keeps thinning, which tells you nobody's stepping in front of that 0.99 wall unless there's a miracle. Draw just firmed to 0.03, saw 0.03, but look at that ask side, still a mountain. So it's more a toe poke than a real breakaway. On the US, depth swelled on both sides and the bid slipped to 0.86, which smells like profit taking, while the favorites still come. We've got a tiny drift lower on the favorite, US sitting 0.96, 0.97, and win prob ticking to 96%. That's the market shaving a little confidence, not calling an upset. Draw demand cooled right back down, so that 0.03 print looked like a quick counterattack that fizzled. Now the US book is basically balanced, asks have crept above bids, so the crowd's shifting from press the advantage to see it out and maybe take some chips off. Australia's top bid even slipping to 0 tells you there's almost no appetite for the upset side at any real size. Australia bid depth just collapsed to a couple $100. There's basically no one willing to catch that falling knife, even at a penny. Draw ticked back to 0.03, 0.03, but it's still staring at a massive 0. US snaps back to a clean 0.97 with bids reloading hard. 216K bid depth versus 117K asks, so the favorite's back on the front foot. Meanwhile, Australia's ask stack just ballooned over $1 million. That's not belief, that's a parking the bus wall of sellers. Draw just tightened to 0.02, and the implied odds dipped. Market's basically saying less chance of a stalemate as the favorite pressure builds. US is pinned 80.97 with even more bid depth behind it, so buyers are lining up like a team. Draw liquidity just got yanked, bid depth halved, and the spread widens back out, so that little tie game narrative is losing oxygen fast. US still glued at 0.97 with light asks, which is classic late game control. Not flashy, but nobody's getting. You're seeing a little hope trade flicker. Australia bid depth pops to $500 and the draw tightens to 0.02. But it's still tiny money versus those skyscraper sell walls 80.99. US remains locked 8. Draw just lost that tight market again, back to 0.02, R1.03, even though bids ticked up, which screams uncertain and thin more than real comeback. US is still a rock 8.97 with buyers stacked, while Australia's only got pocket change support against $1 million. US price finally slips to 0.97, and bid depth collapses from 200K to Y62K, while draw firms to 0.03. Feels like momentum wobble, crowd nerves. Can you frame this like a late game scare or shift in? US snaps back to 98% and the bid reclaims 0.97, but that 0.97-0.98 spread tells you sellers are still leaning on it. More protect the lead than run up the score. Draw stays pinned at 0.02 with big offers overhead, so Australia bid depth perks up a bit, but the real story is the draw book getting heavier on the offer side. Ask depth balloons, so rallies are getting sold into. US stays the favorite 0.97, like a team up 2 goals just. US just went limit up in sports terms. 0.98 bid and ask, no spread, pure confidence trade. But notice the bid depth is lighter than earlier, so it's a strong price with a thinner backstop if sentiment flips. Australia and draw are still basically lottery tickets. That US contract is still locked at 0.98, 0.98, but now the bid depth refills hard. Buyers are stacking the wall again, classic shut the game down behavior. Meanwhile, Australia and the draw are bleeding liquidity on the bid, so the upset side has no real support if it tries to run. Here's the first real wobble. US loses that locked market, bid drops to 0.97, and more importantly, bid depth collapses to about 49K, so the defense in front of the price just thinned out. Draw ticks up with a wider 0.0200. Now US is locked again at 0.9797, but it's a cheaper lock. Market's basically marking down certainty while still keeping the lead. Draw stays wide 80.0200 0.03, so there's nervous hedging, not conviction, and Australia remains. US is still pinned 82.97, 0.97, but the big change is the bid depth roaring back over 226K. Buyers rebuilt the wall after that brief wobble. Draw ticks up to 3% with more bid interest, yet the spread stays wide, so it's more speculative counterattack than. Draw just tightened back to 0.02, so that little panic premium is fading. Markets calming down. US stays glued at 0.97 with even more bid depth, which is basically the favorite parking the bus and daring you to break through. Australia's. We're seeing a bit of two-way trade now. US still stuck 0.97, but the order book is more balanced with asks creeping up and bid depth easing. Less sure thing, more manage the clock. Draw widens again to 0.02, 0.03. That US spread popping back to size 97 0.98 is the tell. Sellers are finally asking for a little more, but the bid depth near 294K says buyers are still camped out in the box. Draw is back to a tight 0.02, 0.02, so the that US book just lost a lot of muscle. Bid depth drops hard while the ask stays heavier, and the spread holds 0.97, 0.98. So the favorite's still ahead, but the crowd's less eager to pay up. Draw remains pinned at 0.02, so 0.02. And just like that, the US bid wall respawns, depth back north of 220K, and the price snaps to a clean 0.97. So confidence is back in the driver's seat. Draw widens to 0.02, 0.03 again, which tells you US is still pinned 80.97, 0.97, but the bid depth is leaking again. Less conviction behind the price, even if the scoreboard hasn't changed. Draw staying 002, SIRE 0.03, with lighter bid says hedgers are cautious, not panicked. Australia's just back. US stays locked 80.97, TWAR 0.97. But the bid depth bouncing back to 200k tells you buyers are reloading. Same scoreline, stronger defense behind it. Draw remains a pricey hedge at 0.02, 0.003. US is still a rock, 80.97, 0.97, and that bid depth creeping up toward 219k says the market's happy to keep buying the favorite on any wobble. Draw liquidity is chunky on the ask side, so upside there looks capped unless something dramatic hits. Australia's still US money keeps stacking. Bid depth up to about 240k while price stays glued at 0.97. That's the market parking the bus with a lead. Australia can't even hold a 1 cent bid consistently, so nobody's chasing the upset. Draws still 0. Now we finally got a little spread on the US. 0.97 bid, 0.98 ask. So sellers are testing the top of the range while buyers still show up with 219k of support. Draw bids thinned out, which screams complacent favorite more than late drama. Australia's US implied ticks up to 98%, and that 0.97, 0.98 spread says the market's trying to walk it in. Buyers strong, but not paying up without a reason. Draw bids firmed a bit, so some late hedging is back on the menu. Australia remains a penny with a skyscraper of sell orders. Australia flashing a 0 bid again tells you the upset side is basically abandoned. No one wants to be the hero catching that falling knife. Meanwhile, the US is back to a tight 0.97, 0.97 with bid depth up near 2. That US bid depth just ballooned to 316k while asks shrank under 80k. This is the crowd piling onto the favorite like a team killing the clock in the corner. Draw liquidity's thinning on the bid, so fewer people are paying for insurance. Australia's still US support cooled from that spike, but it's still a chunky 259k sitting at 0.97. Market's basically saying same game plan, no panic. Australia's back to 0 on the bid, so any upset chatter is just noise. Draw remains the only live hedge, but it's thin. US price is still pinned at 0.97, but that bid depth just slid to Yaj's 182k. Some longs are taking chips off the table while the scoreline still looks safe. Draw probability dipped to 2%, so the hedging away again. Australia's back to a pen. Now the draw bid depth just jumped to about $1.27k, and the top bid actually moved up to 0.02. Someone's buying a little insurance as the clock ticks. US stays nailed at 0.97, but it's not getting more expensive, so momentum Draw is getting crowded on both sides now. Bid depth up near 1.5k, but ask depth ballooning to us 770k. So there's a wall of people ready to sell that insurance. US still holds 0.97, yet asks a thickening too, which feels like that draw market just tightened. Bid and ask both 80.02, so the insurance is suddenly cheaper and more liquid on the touch. Meanwhile, US bid depth rebounded to 237k, so buyers are back defending the lead. Australia's still a penny. US just got a little pricier. Ask ticked up to 0.98 and win odds to 98%. That's the market tightening the spread like a team killing the game off in stoppage time. Draw stays locked 80.020002. Australia pops back to a penny bid, but it's still all air underneath. Tiny depth versus a massive offer stack, so that's not a real comeback signal. The draw book is staying tight 80.02, with bids rebuilding class. US just printed a clean 0.98, 0.98. Market's basically calling it game over, like a team parking the bus with the ref checking his watch. But notice bid depth dropped hard to 154k, so the price is higher even as some buyers step back. Australia back to a big swing back in US support. Bid depth jumps to 246k while price stays pinned at 0.98, so the crowd's still leaning hard into the favorite. Draw asks got even heavier. That's a lot of folks lining up to sell the chaos outcome. Australia remains effectively Now the draw market finally loosens. Ask lifts to 0.03, so sellers are demanding more to take that upset insurance off their hands. US stays firm 80.97, 0.98, with solid depth still the dominant side. Australia US snaps back to a locked 0.98, 0.98, and the bid depth balloons over 300k. This is the crowd piling into the favorite like a late game surge after a turnover. Draw tightens back to 0.02, 0.02, but that top bid at 0. US is still nailed at 0.98, but that bid depth just got cut nearly in half. Buyers stepped off even though the scoreline hasn't changed. Meanwhile, the offer side thickens, so upside feels capped unless fresh money comes in. Draw in Australia remain pure long shot. Whoa, US is still priced like a sure thing at 0.98, but bid depth just collapsed to under 50k while offers sit fat at 134k. So liquidity's drying up on the buy side. That's like a team up 3-0 but suddenly refusing to press. Any surprise? Buyers came back for the US, bid depth rebounds to 146K, and the sell wall thins to 90K, so the favorites back in control. Still, AT 0.98, you're basically paying for a tap in, so any late wobble hurts. Draw in Australia remain all noise, no real money. There's your first real wobble. US bid slips to 0.97 while the ask holds 0.98, so the market's pricing a tiny bit more upset risk. Draw sellers are backing off too. Ask pops to 0.03, like the underdog finally winning a few tackles. Still, US price slipped to 0.97 and there's a massive sell wall at 0.97 of 408K shares with thin bid depth. Feels like late game nerves parking the bus. Can you frame this momentum shift with a match psychology analogy? That scary sell wall at 0.97 just vanished and the US snaps right back to 0.98. Classic head fake to shake out weak hands. Now the book's basically balanced again, so we're back to priced for perfection with very little juice left. Draw tightens back. US ticks back down to 0.97, and it's not just a quote. Bid depth is solid at 133K, so buyers are comfortable paying a hair less. That's the market saying, we're still winning, but we're killing clock now, not going for style points. Draw stays pinned 8.0. US is back to a 0.97, 0.98 spread. Buyers won't chase, sellers won't blink. So we're in a late game stalemate around the favorite. The draw ask widens to around 0.3, which tells you nobody's really buying the surprise equalizer story. Australia's still a Now you're seeing the US bid depth get yanked down to about 55K while the offer still sits heavy, so confidence is thinning even if the price hasn't cracked. That's like the crowd going quiet when the favorite starts passing sideways. Draw stays firm, AT3. US pops back to 0.98, 0.98, but don't get too excited. The bid is still light versus the ask, so it's more walk it in than a breakout. This is that moment where the favorite's up a goal and just keeps possession, daring you to overpay. Draw. Big tell here. That wallet just slammed in a 405K bullish US clip, 80.97. Someone stepping up like a captain taking the penalty. Price holds 0.98, but the bid depth is still thin, so if that support gets pulled, it can wobble fast. That's a real shift. US bid depth jumps back near 200K and now outweighs the ask, so the favorites got fresh legs and a stronger backline of buyers. The draw tightens to 0.02, 0.02, meaning the insurance is getting marked up. Liquidity's evaporating. operating on the long shots. Australia bid depth collapses to basically lunch money, and the draw book is getting weirdly widened with massive offers. Meanwhile, US stays pinned 80.98 with draw just got cheaper on the bid, 0.1, 0.02. So the market's basically saying, we don't need the safety net right now. US still locked at 0.98 with the ask thinning under 90K. So any fresh buy wave can squeeze it toward 1 stars like Australia has literally no bid now. Markets calling it all offers and nobody willing to catch the knife. US bid depth back over 200K with a relatively thin ask, so it's one clean push away from printing 1 like a tap in. Draw Now the US book is screaming game over. Bid depth up to about 217K while the ask is down near 56K, and even the top offer slipped to 0.99. One shove and it's one hurried. Draw demand fades back to 0.01. Whoa, US just lost its wall of support. Bid depth cratered from 217K to 41K, and the spread finally cracks to 0.98, 0.99. That's like the favorite taking its foot off the gas and inviting a nervy finish, even if the odds still say 98%. Leo, the US contract just slipped from 0.98, 0.99 to 0.97, 0.98 with bid depth collapsing. Feels like late game nerves despite 98% implied. Can you riff on that favorite wobble psychology like a team conceding momentum? US snaps back to a clean 0.98, 0.98, but the liquidity's still skinny, 27K aside, so this lade can wobble on one decent order. Draw is now locked, IRA 1, 0.01, basically a pant, and Australia's bid is that US bid wall is back, 129K bid depth versus 40K on the ask, and the market's basically pricing a 99% finish, just waiting for the final whistle at 1.0. Draw widens again to 0.01, 0.0. US just tightened the noose, 0.99, 0.99, with nearly 191K sitting on the bid and only a 13KA for sale. This is the market lining up the tap into 1.0 drew. Draw in Australia are basically dead money, just big dusty ask stacks, 80.99 with US is getting even more one way. Bid depth up to 211K while the ask is still just 13K, so any dip is getting bought like a clearance sale. The only action elsewhere is phantom liquidity. Australia and the draw are basically pennies with massive offers parked at 9. We're basically at match point. US pinned AT99 does 0.99 with 217k of bids underneath and barely 12.7k offered. So the path of least resistance is still straight to 1.0 drew. Draw tightening to 0.01, 0.01 just tells you nobody's paying up for. Now we've got a little wobble in the US book. Bid depth drops hard to 65k while asks creep up to 23k, so the sure thing is still priced at 0.99, but the cushion's thinner. Draw ticks up to 0.02, that's the tiny hedge money sniffing around. Australia has lit. US liquidity just snapped back 208k on the bid, but notice the sell side's building too with 36k offered and a bigger stack waiting at 1.0, so the last penny might take a moment. Draw is back to 0.01 as 0.01 and Australia. US is still glued to 0.99, but the tape's getting a bit more two-sided. Bid depth slid to 139k, while offers ballooned to 51k, and that 1.0 wall is now 42k shares. That's classic protect the lead football. The US price is still nailed at 0.99, but the story is that 1.0 sell wall keeps thickening. Now 542.7k shares, so you're seeing profit takers lining up at the finish line. Draw liquidity is drying up, and Australia's still bideless, so draw just got kneecapped, best bid drops to 0, and depth is basically pocket change, so nobody's even pretending anymore. US stays at 0.99 with that 1.0 wall still growing, which screams cash out line more than fresh conviction. US bid depth just surged back over 211k, while the ask side actually eased a touch. Buyers are still crowding the winner even at 0.999. Draw remains basically untradeable with a 0 bid, and Australia's still a ghost town. This is the market doing There it is, US prints the full 1 hour. Market's basically calling the final whistle and locking the payout. Now it's just settlement traffic. Tiny crumbs in draw. Australia's still dead and everyone queues at 100 like fans heading for the exits. We've got that weird post-goal VAR moment. US still trades at 100, but the displayed win prob ticked to 99%. That's more a data settlement wobble than real doubt. Meanwhile, draw in Australia are just massive offer stacks with almost no bids, so no. Now, the US book is basically all bids, no sellers. Ask depth collapses to about 17.8k, while bids swell past 2 at 33k, so anyone trying to buy is paying up into a locked 1.0. Draws ask stack balloon. Draw just went full penny stock, 0.000 with a million plus sitting on the offer. That's basically no market, just baggage. US stays pinned 8-100 with heavy bid support, so the crowd's already celebrating in the stands. US is completely locked at wine tower and the sell side is evaporating, only about 7K on the ask, so there's basically nothing left to win by chasing it. Meanwhile, draw in Australia are just mountains of offers at zero, like a team parking the bus after conceding. We're seeing the cleanup crew now. US still pinned 8 Waimari, but bid depth drops sharply while the ask refills. Classic late game position squaring, not a change in the scoreline. Draw Australia remain untradeable at zero with huge supply, so the market's still saying. Now it's literally one-way traffic. US has bids at one show and no ask at all, like the refs already reaching for the final whistle. Draw and Australia are still dead at Toyayori with big supply, so nobody's pricing any late drama, just waiting for the settlement tape to. Tiny bit of paper shows back up on the US AT100, but it's only about 1.2K. Still a locked game with buyers stacked over 200K underneath. Draw bids flicker higher, yet it's all at zero against a massive offer wall, so that's just noise. This feels Australia's offer stack just ballooned 1.49 million shares at zero, so that side is basically a clearance rack, nobody's shopping. US is still nailed to 1 with decent bid support and a bit more ask showing, which screams people taking. US ask just vanished again. No one's offering it 1 hour, so it's that ball in the corner flag moment where the winners refuse to give you a touch. Draw liquidity is thinning too, while Australia is still a giant zero price dump. Markets basically froze. Leo, this book is pure game over psychology. US bid depth just exploded to 795K at one houser with no offers, while draw has zero bids and only a 0.99 ask wall. Can you riff on that crowd sentiment late whistle vibe? That US bid stack just went from comfortable to absurd. Over $1 million sitting at Warai with no sellers. So the market's basically stapled to a win. Draw in Australia are still pure zero with big offer walls, meaning nobody's even Now the US bid at 1 hull was over 126 million with 0 asks. This is as priced to perfection as it gets. And the only risk left is mechanical settlement, not the match. Draw's also gone no bid with a fat 0 ask, so nobody's chasing miracles. It's like the ref. US bid depth keeps climbing, $1.32 million parked at 1 Mars, so the market's basically daring anyone to sell a sure thing, and nobody's stepping up. Interesting wrinkle. Someone just paid up to fade the draw at essentially 1 tower. Pure cleanup trade. US is now a $1.37 million wall 8-1 hull and still no offers. People are literally paying full freight for the trophy lift. Meanwhile, Draw and Australia are just dead money at 0 with big ask piles, so the only trade left is who gets filled first. This is like watching Leo, US side just exploded. 339M bid depth at 1 hull with 3.23M shares, still 0 asks. Draw Aus pinned at 0.00 with big ask walls. Can you frame this like late game crowd momentum / game over psychology for viewers? Leo US side just ballooned to a 3.47 MR bid wall at 100 with 0 asks, market treating it like the final whistle already blew. Can you riff on that game over crowd psychology and how momentum looks when everyone's already celebrating? That US book is still a monster, $3.4 million bid at Wyman with no sellers. So it's pure everyone crowds the winning side momentum, not price discovery. The only movement is the dead outcomes, ask stacks shifting around at 0. Basically people. Now the US bid stack swells again, $3.76 million at 1,000 bars. So the market's basically a one-way turnstile into certainty. Draw in Australia asks, keep piling at 0, which tells you nobody's even pretending there's late drama. It's post-game. We're seeing a little deflation in the certainty bid. US depth slips to about $3.62 million, but it's still pinned at 100 with 0 offers, so nobody's stepping in front of that train. The bigger tell is Australia and draw balloon. Australia and the draw just got heavier on the offer side again, near 930k each at 0, so the market's basically dumping the losers into the basement. Meanwhile, the US stays nailed at 1 with a 3.7 MR wall, like a team. Draw offers just surged to about 973k at 0, and Australia's right behind it, so the market's basically throwing both outcomes into the clearance bin. US is still a locked 1.0 with a 3.77 bid wall, like a keeper holding the ball in the corner. We've got a little cooling. US bid depth dips to 3.67 LM, and Australia's 0 ask pile shrinks too, so some folks are finally closing the books. But the draw is still stacked heavy at 0, and with US pinned 8-100, this is just end of match position squaring, not. Big move on the tape. US bid depth jump back over 4.6 INM at Malm. That's fresh money, reinforcing the done deal narrative. Draw shares at zero just ballooned past 2.0 M, so the crowd's fully priced out any extra time chaos. This is a US depth eases a touch to 412 men, but it's still a concrete wall at Winder. Buyers are basically parking the bus and protecting the lead. Australia's zero ask stack just jumped to nearly 1.9 M shares, so any remaining hope is getting sold. Now we're seeing profit taking hit the US side, nearly 400k, reducing long at T1 so that bid wall slips under 4.0 M even though the price won't budge. Australia and the draw are still being offered at zero in size, like the crowd.